I just uploaded a video about making a basic tied quilt with I was using a Model 20 in the video. And I want to also mention again the handheld stitchers. I already have one video up on the Singer Stitch So Quick, which is right here, which is a handheld battery operated, or you can get a DC adapter stitcher. And there are also vintage manual ones without batteries that are wonderful. Now, I bring these up again for a couple of reasons. One is they will also fit in a lunchbox. So they will also, I have about 5 or 6 of these. You have to try to buy them new, vintage, because they come in different colors. I have red, white, blue, green, and yellow. And the yellow one, the needle doesn't sit in there quite right, and the red one is cracked up here. So you want to try to buy them new. They're wonderful. They're chain stitchers, both of them. But these, the smaller ones, take a size 24x1 or 24x1 needle, while the Singer Stitch So Quick takes a normal 15x1 or 15x1 sewing machine needle. So, why are these good? Well, they're good for portability. They're good for quilting, believe it or not. Now, when I was young, I've always said I learned to sew at age 12 in school. I actually had sewing machines before then. I started with the Gateway at age 5. At age 7, it was a Model 20. And then also at age 7, I had one of these. And then at age 12, because I had learned in school on a full-size machine, and yet we couldn't afford to get me a sewing machine, I had one of these. So this is all connected with knowing tension, knowing how your needle is threaded, just the very simple basics of sewing. Another reason these are good is they work off of bobbins. And this is a Dritz bobbin box that is about $7 plus shipping. These are wonderful, and they're especially wonderful for these because you can take all your favorite threads and wind bobbins with all your colors, and this is your thread box. So literally, I mean, even the real box for this is about an 8 by 10. You could just keep it in the box if you wanted to, and not in a lunch box or a small sewing box. Now, what I've used them for recently is more mending or things like that. But I want to mention what I used them for as a child was embroidery. Working from the back of the fabric and using the chain stitch. Now today, when I do hand embroidery text, not cross stitch, but hand embroidery text, I use a chain stitch because it's a perfect stitch for doing text on like a hanky or something. Well, this is a 5-inch square, and as I said, I just posted a video about a basic tied quilt. If you wanted to, or if you wanted to instruct a child to, you could actually embroider each of your 108 squares before you stitch them together, and it would give you a false quilted look. But it's beautiful for embroidery. Now that's just an X, but you can put any design you want on there. And this one obviously goes slower, but you have a little more control. And this one, you just have to get used to how you pull it through. I did this square with this one, the battery operated, and diagonals are in some ways a little bit easier than going around the edge. But it's a good thing to be familiar with anyway, And we talk about power outages and hand cranks and treadles and electric full-size machines. These are all in the same realm. It's just that each machine is better at some things and not so good at other things. Neither of these would be good for machine quilting a large quilt, but you can get that same effect. And then if you actually tie the quilt on top of it, you'd be tying at the 4 points of the corner plus the center. I mean, that's a decorative quilt. And because it's tied, it's completely held together. It would be very pretty. But another thing to mention here, and this is that tied quilt I'm working on, is that you want to bring in pins. You want to make sure that you have your pins. There are a lot of times in my videos that I kind of wing it, and I'll just throw the fabric down and use a line of sight and not worry if all my seams are lined up. And with these, it's much better to use pins. To take the extra time, I have just pinned these two together, and the Singer stitcher with the batteries works from left to right. The fabric goes through this way. So I would be starting here and trying to keep a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way to the end. Now I have made a patchwork vest with the Stitch So Quick. So I use that and a Model 20. I use different chain stitch machines to piece it and then sew it. But I actually sewed it together with the lining to the front piece with the Stitch So Quick. So as long as you do the same thing you would do with the Model 20 and you lock your seam, this is a great way to make a quilt. So we're not only talking about embroidery now, we're talking about with a pin cushion or two full of pins and your fabric squares. And even if you go to this one and do it by hand, you can actually make a tied quilt and not have the expense or the burden of a full-size sewing machine. And add in the portability, you can sit and do this anywhere. I have a few doctor's appointments coming up. I can take this with me instead of a knitting Nancy or a knitting spool. And say I pin 3 rows of a quilt together, and I sit there in the doctor's office waiting to get in, and I get part of a quilt done. So there's all kinds of fun ways. So far, the Gateway, the Model 20, and these, we're up to me being age 12. And yet, I still have them. I mean, not the originals, all of them, but I still have the ability to use them. So it's part of the lifelong learning of all the different aspects of sewing.